The Battle of Komarów, or the Zamość Ring, was one of the most important battles of the Polish-Bolshevik War. It took place between the 30th of August and the 2nd of September 1920, near the village of Komarowo near Zamość. It was one of the largest cavalry battles since 1813 and the last great battle of any significance in which cavalry was used as such and not as mounted infantry. The battle ended in complete disaster for the Russian 1st Cavalry Army, which sustained heavy casualties and barely avoided being surrounded and annihilated. Eve of the battle. After the Battle of Zamość, the forces of the Bolshevik 1st Cavalry Army under Semyon Budyonny were halted for over a day. By this time the Russian cavalry units had lost much of their initiative and had not managed to reach or intervene in the Battle of Warsaw. After the Bolsheviks lost the struggle for the capital of Poland and started their retreat eastwards, the forces of Budyonny were ordered by Tukhachevsky to march northwards to attack the right flank of Joseph Pilsudski's advancing forces in order to draw Polish forces away from the north and relieve pressure on the routed Bolshevik Western Army. Tukhachevsky believed that if Polish forces were required to turn south, he could reverse the disaster unfolding in the north and resume his westward offensive to capture Warsaw. However, heavy fighting in the area of Lwow and the Upper Bug River postponed the march. By the time the 1st Cavalry Army reached the area of Zamość on August 30, 1920, the Poles had already managed to redirect much of their troops to the area and organize a line of defense. Initial clashes. On August 29, the 1st Cavalry Army fought the first battle with units of Polish 1st Cavalry Division, a small, special battalion, led by Major Stanislaw Mrzik, fought a successful delaying action near the village of Wers. Later that day, the Polish 1st Kreczo-Uhlan Regiment chanced upon several unprepared Bolshevik units and took 150 POWs. 3 pieces of artillery and 7 machine guns in the villages of Lykoshin and Tyso. The following day, the Bolshevik units continued their advance towards Zamość, but found the Polish mobile defense difficult to break. The garrison of the fortress was composed of a number of units commanded by Captain Mikołaj Boltuk. Among them were the remnants of Ukrainian 6th Infantry Division under Colonel Marko Bezruszko, 1 regiment and 2 battalions of Polish infantry, 3 armored trains and a number of smaller units, some 700 bayonets and 150 sabres altogether. At the same time, the Polish 1st Cavalry Division moved to the villages of Wolica, Brzozowa and Komarów, to the west of the city. On his arrival in the Zamość area, Budyonny was left with 3 choices. He could assault the heavily defended city, try to break through the trenches of the 13th Infantry Division in the forests west of it, or try to attack the unknown number of Polish cavalry units some 20 kilometers to the west. Despite having little knowledge of the opposing forces, Budyonny did not expect significant opposition just yet and ordered his troops to bypass the city from the west. Phase 1. In the early morning of August 31, a Bolshevik cavalry brigade crossed the belt of swamps to the north of the Polish positions. At the same time, the 11th Cavalry Division was engaged by Polish infantry in the village of Lubianki, while the 6th Cavalry Division was cut out overnight by Polish infantry to the west of Zamość. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the 200-man 2nd Regiment of Kreczo-Uhlans was ordered to capture Hill 255 to the north of the main lines of Polish cavalry. The hill was captured with no opposition. Soon afterwards, a large Russian tabor was spotted, disorganized and mixed with a much larger unit of Bolshevik cavalry. With no time to hesitate, the Poles charged, inflicting heavy casualties on the enemy rear units. Soon afterwards, the Poles were successfully counter-attacked by Russian troops and forced to abandon the hill and retreat into the nearby village of Wolica. Nyatka. There the Russian advance was stopped by Polish heavy machine gun fire, and at 10 o'clock the Polish 9th Regiment of Lesser Poland Uhlans under Major Dembinski charged the Russian positions and managed to recapture Hill 225. The Russians counterattacked several times, but to no effect. Meanwhile, the village of Woloka-Nyatinska, lost to the Bolshevik cavalry, was charged by the Polish 8th Uhlan Regiment of Duke Joseph Poniatowski. After a short fight, the disorganized Bolshevik forces were forced to retreat, leaving behind a large part of their heavy equipment and Budyonny's staff car. The Russian commander himself evaded being captured. The Bolshevik 4th Cavalry Division was routed. At 12 o'clock, the Polish 9th Regiment started another charge down the hill on the Russian 11th Cavalry Division that had replaced the withdrawing 4th Division. The assault was repelled, with heavy casualties on both sides. After approximately 30 minutes, the Russian forces were forced to retreat. However, the Polish 7th Cavalry Brigade was seriously depleted. Also, the 9th Regiment suffered serious casualties from friendly artillery fire. The Polish 5th Cavalry Brigade, until then kept as a reserve, started a pursuit down the hill. After a cavalry charge on the left flank of the withdrawing Bolshevik cavalry, the latter started a disorganized retreat towards Zamość. The pursuit was carried over by the 12th Podolski Uhlan Regiment under Captain Tadeusz Komorowski. During the retreat, the Poles inflicted heavy casualties on the enemy. After the pursuit ended, the fighting was halted until 5 p.m. Phase 2. At approximately 5 p.m., the 8th Regiment near the village of Woloka-Nyatinska was yet again assaulted by Bolshevik cavalry. To counter the threat, Colonel Rommel ordered the whole 5th Cavalry Brigade to charge the enemy's flank. After a huge clash, the Russian forces in the area fell back northwards. After a short rest, the whole Russian 6th Cavalry Division, the strongest unit in the area, managed to finally break through a Polish infantry encirclement and arrived at the battlefield. The Polish 6th Brigade was resting in and around the village of Niewyków, where it had withdrawn after the successful pursuit several hours earlier. The 7th Brigade started its march northeast to join the forces of 6th Brigade near Niewyków. Halfway, it spotted a huge Russian line emerging from the forests around Woloka-Nyatinska. The Russian 6th Division formed a line, but had not yet initiated an assault. Julius Rommel ordered all his available units to launch an all-out assault before the Russians started their attack. The 8th and 9th Regiments made a frontal charge, while the 1st Kreczo-Uhlans Regiment was ordered to attack the left flank of the enemy. Soon it was joined by the remaining elements of the 12th Regiment from Niewyków, charging the enemy positions from the rear. After a 30-minute clash, Budyonny ordered his division to retreat. The only available way led east, through the positions of the dug-in 2nd Legion's Infantry Division under Colonel Mitchell Lyswinski. The retreating Bolsheviks managed to break through, but suffered heavy casualties. By the end of the day, the battle was over. Results and casualties. The Polish 1st Cavalry Division then pursued the retreating Soviets. The forces of Budyonny managed to break through Polish lines, but the Poles did not leave them enough time to rest and reorganize. On September 2, the Polish 5th Cavalry Brigade reached Lashchow, where it successfully outflanked the Russian 44th Infantry Division and annihilated one of its regiments. The 1st Cavalry Army itself was not surrounded and managed to avoid complete destruction, but it no longer posed a threat to the advancing Poles. Unable to regroup, on September 5, 1920 it lost the town of Rubizo and Włodzimierz Wolyński the following day. On September 12, 1920, Polish forces withdrawn from the Battle of the Niemen under General Władysław Sikorski started a successful offensive on Bolshevik-held Volhynia. Pressed from all directions, the 1st Cavalry Army lost ground on September 18 and was forced to retreat further eastwards. By the end of September, the Polish forces reached the Slucha River, near the lines held by the Reds before their offensive towards Warsaw started. Soon afterwards, Budyonny's army had to be withdrawn from the front, not to return until after the ceasefire that October. The Battle of Komarów was a complete disaster for the Russian 1st Cavalry Army. Numerically greatly superior, it failed to concentrate and act as an organized unit, which resulted in several consecutive waves of attacks, each of them repelled by the Poles. A lack of communication and complete disregard for intelligence reports resulted in heavy losses on the Russian side. After the battle, its political commissars, Joseph Stalin and Klement Voroshilov, failed to control the men in their command. With morale and discipline at a low point, robbery and violence by the Red Cossacks against the civilian population became commonplace. The 1st Cavalry Army also became known for periodic outbreaks of murderous anti-Semitism. The Polish army lost approximately 500 killed in action and 700 horses. No Poles were taken prisoner by the Red Army. The exact losses of the latter are unknown and were never made public. Because of the numbers of forces involved, the Battle of Komarów is considered the greatest cavalry battle of the 20th century. It is sometimes referred to as the greatest cavalry battle after 1813, or the Miracle at Zamość. However, the former is incorrect. More cavalry were present at the 1863 Battle of Brandy Station, during the American Civil War, than at Komarów. Opposing forces